In 1913, Carl Jung discovered 3 hidden laws that deep thinkers unconsciously follow to see through every social lie, every manipulation, and every illusion that keeps ordinary people trapped. He found these patterns buried in his analysis of history's greatest minds, from Nietzsche to Tesla to Leonardo da Vinci. Men who seem to possess an almost supernatural ability to cut through the noise and see reality as it actually is. But here's what Jung realized that terrified him. These weren't special gifts or genetic advantages. They were learnable psychological methods that any deep thinker could master. So why don't they teach you these laws in school? Why don't your parents explain them? Why does society seem designed to keep you from discovering them? Because once you understand Jung's 3 hidden laws, you become impossible to manipulate. You stop falling for the narratives that keep everyone else distracted. You start seeing the strings behind the puppet show. Jung called people who mastered these laws individuated, but what he really meant was ungovernable. If you've ever felt like you see things others miss, if you've ever been called too intense or overthinking, if you've ever felt isolated because you question what everyone else accepts without thinking, then you're already using these laws instinctively. But most deep thinkers never learn to use them systematically. They suffer in silence, feeling different, misunderstood, like they're living in a world designed for someone else. Here's what's going to happen in the next 20 minutes. I'm going to reveal Jung's 3 hidden laws that separate deep thinkers from everyone else. Laws that don't just help you see through everything, they help you navigate a world that wasn't built for people like you. By the end, you'll understand why Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." So, let me ask you, are you ready to stop hiding your depth? Or are you going to keep pretending to be smaller than you are? Before I reveal Jung's first hidden law, you need to understand what happened to Jung himself that led him to discover these patterns. Because what I'm about to tell you will explain why being a deep thinker often feels like a curse instead of a gift. In 1907, Jung was working alongside Sigmund Freud, the most famous psychologist in the world. Everyone expected Jung to follow Freud's theories without question, but Jung couldn't stop asking deeper questions, seeing patterns Freud missed, challenging assumptions everyone else accepted. Here's the shocking part. Freud didn't just disagree with Jung's insights. He tried to destroy Jung's career for thinking too deeply. This is the deep thinker's dilemma that Jung identified. The very qualities that make you valuable, your ability to see patterns, question assumptions, think independently, make you threatening to people who benefit from shallow thinking. You've experienced this your entire life, haven't you? In school, when you asked why one too many times, teachers told you to stop disrupting the class. At family dinners, when you pointed out contradictions in conversations, relatives said you were being difficult. At work, when you suggested better ways of doing things, colleagues accused you of being arrogant. But here's what Jung discovered that changes everything. You're not the problem, the system is. Most people live in what Jung called collective unconsciousness, a shared trance where they adopt beliefs, behaviors, and values without questioning them. They follow scripts handed down by family, education, media, and culture. Deep thinkers naturally resist this trance. Your mind instinctively looks for patterns, inconsistencies, and deeper meanings. You can't help but see what others miss. Jung realized this isn't a personality flaw. It's a psychological advantage, but only if you understand how to use it correctly. Most deep thinkers make the same critical mistake. They try to fit into a world designed for shallow thinking. They suppress their insights, doubt their perceptions, and exhaust themselves trying to be normal. Jung's breakthrough was realizing that deep thinkers need a completely different psychological strategy, not to fit in, but to thrive as who they actually are. Tesla understood this intuitively. While other inventors followed conventional approaches, Tesla trusted his deep thinking to revolutionize electricity. Nietzsche embodied this principle, rejecting popular philosophy to create his own system of thought. Now, here's Jung's first hidden law that makes this transformation possible. And I have to warn you, Once you start applying this law, you'll never see social interactions the same way again. Jung's first hidden law is what I call shadow recognition, and it's the most disturbing discovery he ever made about human psychology. In 1912, Jung was analyzing why intelligent people believe obvious lies, why good people support harmful systems, and why entire societies can be manipulated into collective madness. He discovered that every person, every group, and every society has a shadow, the aspects of reality they refuse to acknowledge because it threatens their self-image. Here's what makes this law so powerful for deep thinkers. While everyone else is blind to shadows, you naturally see them everywhere. When your family claims to value honesty but punishes you for telling uncomfortable truths, you're seeing their shadow. When your company talks about innovation but fires people who suggest real changes, you're seeing their shadow. When society preaches equality while maintaining systems of advantage, you're seeing the collective shadow. Tesla saw the shadow of the scientific establishment when they rejected his wireless electricity ideas. Leonardo da Vinci saw the shadow of the church when they condemned his anatomical studies. Jung himself saw Freud's shadow when Freud refused to consider ideas that challenged his theories. But here's where most deep thinkers get trapped. They point out shadows and expect people to thank them for the insight. Jung discovered this is psychological suicide. When you expose someone's shadow without understanding shadow recognition, you become the enemy because admitting the shadow exists would shatter their entire identity. So how do deep thinkers use shadow recognition correctly? First, recognize that shadows aren't evil. They're unconscious. Most people aren't deliberately hiding truth. They literally cannot see it because seeing it would be too psychologically threatening. Second, understand that your ability to see shadows is your superpower, not your burden. While others are confused by contradictory behavior, you see the hidden psychological forces driving everything. Third, learn to work with shadows strategically instead of attacking them directly. Tesla didn't convince the establishment by arguing. He demonstrated results they couldn't ignore. Leonardo didn't debate the church. He conducted his studies in secret until the world was ready. Jung developed specific techniques for this. When someone exhibits shadow behavior, don't point it out immediately. Instead, ask questions that help them discover it themselves. What do you think motivates people who do X? Have you ever noticed the pattern where Y happens whenever Z occurs? When you encounter collective shadows in your workplace, family, or society, document the patterns privately before deciding how to respond. Jung kept detailed journals of shadow observations that became his most important work. When your own shadow recognition triggers emotional reactions in others, don't take it personally. Jung realized that deep thinkers often serve as shadow mirrors for people who aren't ready to see their own contradictions. Here's the most important part. Shadow recognition isn't about becoming cynical or superior. It's about developing what Jung called conscious awareness, the ability to see reality clearly without being consumed by it. This is why deep thinkers who master shadow recognition become incredibly effective. They can navigate complex social and psychological dynamics that confuse everyone else. But shadow recognition is just the foundation. Because once you can see what others deny, Jung's second hidden law shows you how to protect yourself from the psychological manipulation that shadows enable. What I'm about to reveal next is even more crucial for deep thinkers, because it explains why you often feel emotionally drained after social interactions. In 1914, Jung made a discovery that would revolutionize psychology forever. He realized that most human conflict isn't actually about the surface issue people are arguing about. It's about unconscious psychological projection. Jung's second hidden law is projection detection, the ability to recognize when people are projecting their internal conflicts onto external targets. Here's what makes this law essential for deep thinkers. You're a natural target for other people's projections because your depth triggers their insecurities. When someone calls you arrogant for having well-researched opinions, they're projecting their fear of intellectual inadequacy. When family members say, "You're too sensitive for noticing emotional patterns," they're projecting their discomfort with feelings. When colleagues accuse you of overthinking, they're projecting their anxiety about their own shallow analysis. Tesla experienced this constantly. When other scientists called his ideas impossible, they were projecting their fear of their own limited thinking. When Edison dismissed Tesla's alternating current system, he was projecting his investment in inferior direct current technology. Jung himself faced this when Freud accused him of being disloyal for developing independent theories. Freud was projecting his fear of losing intellectual control. But here's where Jung's insight becomes psychologically liberating for deep thinkers. Once you can detect projection, you stop taking other people's reactions personally. Most deep thinkers suffer emotionally because they assume criticism reflects their actual flaws. They think, maybe I am too intense, maybe I should think less deeply, maybe there's something wrong with me. Projection detection reveals the truth. Most criticism directed at deep thinkers says nothing about you and everything about the projector's internal state. Here's how to develop master-level projection detection. First, listen for emotional intensity that exceeds the situation. When someone has a strong reaction to your thinking style, question, or insight, ask yourself, what internal conflict might this trigger for them? Second, notice projection patterns. Jung observed that people consistently project the same issues. Someone who frequently calls others selfish is usually struggling with their own selfishness. Someone who constantly accuses others of lying often has issues with honesty. Third, recognize projection timing. People project most when they're feeling threatened, inadequate, or confronted with their own limitations. A deep thinker's natural tendency to analyze and question often triggers these psychological states in others. Fourth, develop what Jung called psychological immunity. When you can detect projection, you can respond to the underlying insecurity rather than the surface attack. Instead of defending yourself against projections, you can sometimes address the real issue compassionately. Tesla did this brilliantly. Instead of arguing with critics who projected their limitations onto his innovations, he focused on demonstrating results. He understood their resistance was psychological, not rational. Jung used this principle in therapy. When patients projected their fears onto him, he recognized these as opportunities to help them see their internal conflicts more clearly. But here's the most powerful application. Projection detection helps you maintain your psychological energy. Instead of absorbing other people's projected emotions, you can observe them without internalization. This is crucial because deep thinking requires enormous mental energy. If you're constantly processing other people's projections as if they're accurate reflections of reality, you'll exhaust yourself psychologically. However, even mastering shadow recognition and projection detection isn't enough to thrive as a deep thinker because Jung discovered a third hidden law that's even more powerful, one that explains how deep thinkers can actually use their psychological insights to create the life they want. In 1916, during the chaos of World War I, Jung made his most revolutionary discovery. While the world was consumed by collective madness, he identified the psychological process that allows certain individuals to remain psychologically sovereign no matter what's happening around them. Jung called this process individuation. But what he really discovered was the third hidden law, conscious individuation, the systematic method for becoming who you truly are instead of who others expect you to be. Here's what makes this law the most powerful. It transforms the deep thinker's greatest weakness into their ultimate strength. Most deep thinkers feel isolated because they see things others don't. They feel misunderstood because their minds work differently. They feel exhausted because they're constantly adapting to a world that wasn't designed for them. But Jung realized this isolation isn't a bug, it's a feature. Deep thinkers are naturally being pulled toward conscious individuation. Your inability to fit into collective thinking isn't a flaw. It's your psyche's way of forcing you to become yourself instead of a copy of someone else. Tesla embodied this completely. His deep thinking made him unemployable in conventional systems, so he created his own path. His isolation from mainstream science forced him to develop revolutionary innovations that changed the world. Leonardo da Vinci lived this principle centuries before Jung identified it. His deep thinking made him an outsider in every field he entered, so he became a master of multiple disciplines instead of a specialist in one. Nietzsche experienced this transformation. His philosophical depth made him incompatible with academic institutions, so he developed his own system of thought that influenced centuries of thinkers. Here's how conscious individuation works for deep thinkers. First, accept that your psychological makeup is fundamentally different. Stop trying to think like everyone else. Stop apologizing for seeing patterns others miss. Stop suppressing your insights to make others comfortable. Second, use your shadow recognition and projection detection abilities strategically. Instead of being overwhelmed by what you see, become a conscious observer of human psychology. Your depth gives you access to insights that most people will never develop. Third, create systems that support your natural thinking style. Jung developed his own therapeutic approach. Tesla built his own laboratory. Leonardo created his own artistic techniques. Deep thinkers thrive when they design their environment around their psychological needs. Fourth, find or create communities of other individuated people. Jung maintained correspondence with other deep thinkers worldwide. Tesla connected with inventors and visionaries who understood his perspective. Deep thinking doesn't mean complete isolation. It means conscious selection of relationships. Fifth, use your insights to contribute something meaningful to the world. Jung's psychological discoveries helped millions understand themselves better. Tesla's innovations revolutionized technology. Your depth isn't just for personal benefit. It's a gift you can offer others. But here's the most important aspect of conscious individuation. It requires what Jung called conscious suffering. The process of becoming yourself instead of conforming to others' expectations involves psychological discomfort. Most people avoid this discomfort by staying unconscious, following scripts, and never fully developing their potential. Deep thinkers have the psychological capacity to tolerate this discomfort and transform it into wisdom. This is why Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Most people never claim this privilege because they're afraid of the psychological work it requires. But you're different. Your deep thinking has already prepared you for this journey. Now, here's what Jung never told anyone about putting all three laws together. So here we are. You now understand Jung's three hidden laws that deep thinkers use to see through everything and transform their depth into power. Shadow recognition, seeing what others deny about themselves and society without becoming bitter or cynical about it. Projection detection, recognizing when people's reactions to you reflect their internal conflicts rather than your actual flaws. Conscious individuation, using your natural isolation and different thinking style to become who you truly are instead of who others expect you to be. Tesla mastered all three and revolutionized technology. Leonardo embodied all three and became a Renaissance genius. Jung integrated all three and transformed psychology. But here's what I haven't told you yet, and this is crucial for deep thinkers. These laws only work when you understand the specific sequence for implementing them in daily life. Most deep thinkers try to apply psychological insights randomly and end up more confused than before. Others focus on just one law and wonder why they're not seeing results. But there's a precise methodology that Jung developed for integrating these laws into a complete system of psychological sovereignty. There's also something Jung discovered about what he called the collective shadow, the psychological forces that specifically target deep thinkers to keep them isolated and ineffective. Understanding these forces is essential for protecting your mental energy and using your insight strategically. And there's the question of what comes after individuation. Because once you've mastered these 3 laws, once you've become psychologically sovereign, then what? Jung had specific ideas about the deep thinker's role in society that he never published publicly. These are the questions I address in my next video, where I reveal Jung's secret methodology for psychological transformation, the step-by-step process he developed for moving from confused, deep thinking to strategic psychological mastery. Because understanding these 3 laws is just the beginning. Implementing them systematically, that's where the real transformation happens. The question is, are you ready to stop suffering from your depth and start using it as the superpower it actually is? Thank you for watching. See you in the next dimension. If you're ready to continue this journey, subscribe and check out my video on Nietzsche's 3 Forbidden Strategies, where I reveal how to break free from psychological programming completely.